Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this very interesting little knife right here. This is the Ruike P671 front flipper. So first off, full disclosure, this guy was actually provided to me directly from Ruike. They sent this guy along. After reaching out to me, I told them, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They said, yeah, no problem. And so they sent it along. So thanks to that, but we do have to assume this is going to be the very best quality controlled one of these ever, and I've done my best not to let that affect my review. So there you go. Next thing, size comparison. Let me grab my size comparison knives, which are hiding behind a bottle of rubbing alcohol, which is a strange sentence. So, right here we have the Spyderco Delica. Right here we have the Ontario Rat number 1 and your Rat number 2. So you can see here, this is actually a relatively small knife. There aren't that many knives in this, well, there are lots of knives in this size category, but in the front flipper world, not so many. There is that. That is the size. And then finally, a quick note, this is a Chinese brand. I've reviewed a couple of things by them before. They're actually doing pretty good work. Here's another one that this is the, what is it? The 801 right here. You can see very similar stuff. But yeah, so very interesting piece by Ruike, who is using San Renmu, I believe, as their factory, and partnered up with Phoenix Flashlights, are owned by the same people. There's a link there. But anyways, that's who these folks are, and let's talk about what's good, what's great, what's bad, and what's ugly of this very interesting little knife right here. So on the good side, to start with, it has a very compact size. You can see here that no matter how you measure this guy, this is coming in under 3 inches here. Closer to 2.75, which is a legal line in a couple of weird places. So there is that. That's definitely a nice thing for a lot of folks. Next thing, the blade shape on this is nice. It's a good blade. It's got a fair amount of belly to it, but actually it's targeted well such that you can get access to most of it. This little bit of back curve means this little bit of blade isn't great on a cutting board, but still, it's a relatively good blade shape, and it actually comes down to an edge that is reasonably thin, even though the stock on it is quite weirdly thick. So the blade is good, and then the steel on this guy is 14C28N, which is an absolutely solid steel for a budget sort of knife. So that's good. Next thing, this guy has very easy access to the lock bar here. You can see the lock bar is right inside there, scalloped, easy to disengage. Great lock bar tension, no stick. Beautiful freaking thing. Next thing, this has a deep carry clip. And that deep carry clip carries deeply. It does have screws in the path there, but it's high enough that it's not a big problem. Nice. No real complaints there. Then finally, on the good side, the ergonomics of it are actually pretty decent. If you grip it in this pattern, which is really you can kind of choke up a little bit, but it's a little sketchy. But in this grip, it actually feels pretty good in the hand. So to me, at least, that all is what is good. Actually, I should also say the thumb stud action is quite good. It has a very strong detent for the thumb stud, so it deploys quite reliably in that way. So, to me, that's the good. It's that the detent is pretty strong for a thumb stud knife. It is got good ergos, a nice deep carry clip, easy lock bar access, a nice blade, and a very compact size. On the great side, to me, this guy is a budget-friendly front flipper. So, front flippers are this kind of thing right here. You can see it's got this little protuberance up at the top there. And if you press on this protuberance, the knife will pop on open there. So, you can do one of these guys. Pop it open with your thumb. Now, it has a nice tall front flipper, which makes it a little bit easier to pop open, given the strength of the dent here. But front flippers are not necessarily for everybody. They require a different sort of, I don't want to say skill set, but at the very least, it takes some adjustment. And so it's very nice to have a budget-friendly option. This is a $40 knife, which is pretty good, by the way. But it's nice to have a $40 option to try out front flipping rather than some of the more pricey ones that we've got going on here. And especially from a company that is, well, regularly bringing this kind of value. No freaking complaints there. So to me, what's great to me about this guy is that this is a budget knife, but it's also got the front flipping approach, which is something that I like seeing. And this is a nice demo for trying to figure out if you like the front flippers. On the bad side, look, still, I'm not a huge fan of the company name just because it's super ambiguous. There's Rake. This is Rake, apparently, if you spell it that way in pinyin or something or another. But there's also Reich knives. It's just like, guys, no, I still don't love that. Next thing, can we have a name for the damn knife, please? P671CB. Not exactly so, catchy there. I'm not a big fan of that. Next thing, the stock on this guy is weirdly thick. I don't know why this knife's stock thickness is as high as it is. Let's see here. Let's measure this up. Coming in at 0.13 inches. That's a fair amount of stock thickness. This is not a big knife. Why is the stock this thick? there's no justification. Next thing, the carbon fiber on this is fine, but it comes across a little bit stickery. And in fact, I suspect that there is a carbon fiber sticker on the top of the G10 that is actually underneath there. You can kind of see a line where the carbon fiber stops. Not a huge fan, and it's also a little bit slippery, too. There are lots of other areas that give you a little bit more traction, like this little back bit, and then having your finger groove here, but still, not a fan of the carbon fiber, and especially for a front flipper, where you really do need a fair amount of traction to be able to pop this guy out. Not a fan of that. Next thing, the detent on this guy is actually, it's very nice for thumb studs. It's very strong detent, but it's actually a little too strong for front flipping. I found myself, as a result, using the thumb stud more, even though I am quite versed in front flipper too. That's something you want to keep in mind. Next thing, this is a very thick knife, actually. If we put this down this way and compare it to your Spicodelica here, oh my gosh, is this guy thick. I mean, holy crap. Not only is the blade stock too damn thick, which we already talked about, but the knife itself is too damn thick. We are coming in here over half an inch thick, and that's not including, like, screws and clips and whatnot. I don't quite understand why this knife is as thick as it is. I feel like maybe they could have done the G10 a little bit thinner. They could have done the blade a little thin. Like, this knife would just make a lot more sense if it were just shrunk on this dimension a little bit. That doesn't, and it's also a little bit on the heavy side, too, as a result. Where is my scale? Here is my scale. All right, we have 3.7 ounces. Oh, yeah, it's a little beefy for the size. Not a huge deal, but it's a thing. Next thing, this does have this big old thumb stud here, and it is in the slicing path. I get the feeling that you could probably pop that off of there, but, you know, I didn't try because this is going to be going on to another Rona. Yeah, but I'm not a huge fan of that thumb stud. I kind of wish that were located a little bit more front. Make things easier. Next thing, it is, well, actually, this is the last thing, is that this guy actually is kind of squeaky. I'm going to kind of pull this up to the camera. I don't know if you're hearing that. I hope you're hearing that. But for some reason, the blasting that they've done on this blade here, coupled with the lock bar, the tent ball gliding on there, gives you thing every time you open it. Now look, is this any problem at all? No, not really. Acoustically speaking, if you are trying to be completely silent, every other part of this knife is louder, but it's still a little weird. It's like, guys, why is this knife playing for me the song of its people? I don't understand that. Not a huge thing, but it's kind of a little weird. So to me, all of that is the bad, is that it is a little squeaky. It's not ground to cut super well. It's got this big thumb stud in the slicing path here. It is pretty thick and heavy. The detent's a bit strong. Not loving the carbon fiber. The stock is just weirdly thick. Guys, why? This should be something you have to justify. Can we have a name, please, and can we have another name? On the ugly front, there's nothing particularly ugly here. I mean, one could make an argument that thickness is ugly, but at the same time, it'll fill some hands better. Whatever. So, let's jump into the final conclusion. And my final conclusion on this guy is that this is fine. At some level, what this knife is best is a nice little way for people to decide whether a front flipper is a good choice for them, whether they like front flipping. And it is a fine little piece for everyday carry. Even beyond that, it's a nice option, I guess, for folks under 3-inch areas. And for $40, though, that's all it needs to be. It's allowed to be fine. It's allowed to have some little issues with the thick stock, the iffy carbon fiber-ish thing, the detent. It's a little strong for the flipping. A beefy stature, a beefy thumb stud. And, you know, it's thrilled to play you a little song. All of those things are okay at $40, but don't leave my heart freaking singing, if you will. So my final conclusion on this guy is that this knife really, its main use is figuring out if you like front flippers. If you are front flipper curious, and there are many people who are, you don't need to be ashamed of it. But if you decide you are front flipper curious, you can pick one of these guys up and then for $40, find out quite nicely. If you like it, if you like the front flipper too, then you can carry this one for a little while and then buy something nicer. Move up to a nicer front flipper. And there are lots of nicer front flippers and more so every day. So you can do something like that. But if you decide, you know what, I don't really like the front flipper approach, you've still got a knife with a thumb stud, which is good. And at the very least, you've got yourself a pretty decent beater or a truck knife kind of thing. So I think it's a fine knife for that purpose. And frankly, it's a fine knife, I guess, in general. I could survive with this. I wouldn't want to survive with this being my only knife, but I could probably pull it off. But nevertheless, I don't see this being a long-term, oh my God, you need to pick one of these knives up choice for other people, especially if you already know your feelings on the front flipping in the future. So anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.